Hi, my name is Peter and I'm the Dutch carnivore. Dutch for 40 years and carnivore for 1.5 years. Today let's talk about some less common health benefits of the carnivore diet. Do you have blood in your urine or does your urine look like Coca-Cola? Then stick until the end of the video because you might find this useful. So today it is exactly 1.5 years ago that I started carnivore. 1.5 years before that I started a keto diet. And that did already miracles for my blood glucose management, because I'm a type 1 diabetic, so my pancreas is not able to secrete insulin anymore, and that means that I have to resort to daily insulin injections and keep a close eye on my glucose levels to keep them in range. And you can imagine that that's very difficult on a high carb diet. And when I went on a keto diet, that did miracles, and basically now my blood glucose values are in range 100% of the time. So there might be the occasional spike if there's really a technical error or some weird circumstances. But overall, like this, in my opinion, I'm able again to lead a normal life. My lab values are also just as those of healthy people again. But blood glucose management is not the topic of today's video. Today I would like to talk about some other health benefits. If you want to fully understand why this low carb approach is good for blood glucose management though, then read this book over here by Dr. Bernstein, The Diabetes Solution. He gives a very good explanation of why this diet works and how to begin with it. So right now I'd like to focus on another less common health benefit, as I explained. Pre-carnivore, I used to follow what I would call a healthy Mediterranean diet. So I was not on a standard American diet. I was on a moderate carb Mediterranean diet, which included still also some meat, some fish and eggs. But also a lot of plant foods. So a lot of vegetables, some fruit, not too much. So what you would call a balanced diet. Also nuts and seeds were a big part of it, and particularly almond, because I was following a gluten-free diet that did very well for my gut. It helped a lot, but gluten-free of course means that you are using all these artificial starches and flours, so like almond flour, and besides that you're also using things like cornstarch typically if you buy gluten-free products from the supermarket. So unlike today, my diet was, let's say, heavily plant-based. In particular, a lot of leafy greens, almonds, seeds, and that sort of things. Well, it's important to realize that although these foods contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, they are also loaded with anti-nutrients. Things like lectins, gluten and oxalates. And these block the absorption of the vitamins and minerals. And worse, even worse, they can also induce autoimmune reactions. So it might very well be that even my type 1 diabetes is partly caused by these anti-nutrients. Who knows? So, as I said, one of the anti-nutrients are oxalates. And these are quite nasty. So these oxalates, they bind to calcium and magnesium. And that's why they are also able to form kidney stones. But it gets even worse because oxalates can also cause a lot of other troubles in the body. So they can, as I said, form kidney stones. But also elsewhere they can condense in crystals and give gout-like symptoms and all kinds of other inflammation. If you want to know more about it, I recommend reading this book over here from Sally K. Norton. She is, I would say, almost the world expert on oxalates. There you can find all the things about what oxalates do in our body, how our body tries to get rid of them, and of course how to avoid consuming too many oxalates to begin with. In my case, oxalates caused primarily symptoms around the bladder. Apparently my bladder was that much inflamed that I started to pee blood even. But also more commonly I would have a cloudy urine, typically after eating oxalates, but also at random times. But it was most obvious when I would eat a dish of spinach, for example, with some garlic and also meat, that I would get cloudy urine. So at first I thought this was a gout symptom, because people would think that eating a lot of meat, it will increase your uric acid, and maybe that was why my urine was so cloudy. But the doctors have done a lot of tests, so they also did echoes on my kidneys and my bladder, and everything was perfectly all right. They did also a thorough analysis of my urine, and they were unable to find what substances were there. So even at a sophisticated lab, doing much more than just a protein test, was unable to tell what was floating around in my urine. And that was quite surprising, because later on I learned that it was simply oxalates. The urine is maybe, for me at least, the primary tract through which the body tries to get rid of the oxalates. For some other people it can go via the gut, or it can even be that crystals are exiting from your eyes and from your skin. That's maybe less common. The primary way of getting rid of oxalates is through the gut and through the urine, via the kidneys. But for me, unfortunately, it was the bladder, and I would mostly notice it after running, because my bladder was inflamed, and you could imagine that the bladder is like a water balloon. If it's not totally filled, the walls of the bladder, which are way thicker, of course, than a water balloon, they would start to hit each other. And since they were inflamed, that would cause the release of blood in my urine. So that was quite scary, and I had to find out why this was on my own. It took several months to fully to be totally sure about where it was coming from. But now, since at least 1 year, I have had not any symptoms of this anymore. Very scary, of course, because I'm a type 1 diabetic, and maybe the one biggest thing that you fear the most as a type 1 diabetic, besides maybe heart disease or so, is to have failing kidneys, because that happens so commonly. Luckily, I get a urine test and a blood test every year. Those markers also this time were okay. So that gives me even more confidence to think that everything was caused by the oxalates. Also, that's an important thing to mention, also because my blood glucose management, also pre-carnivore, was already quite okay. So there was objectively no reason to think that I was more prone to develop any complications from diabetes this early on, because although I am diabetic for 15 years, that is still quite early in the disease process. A similar thing happened several times when I went for some longer runs. When I went for example, 10 kilometers, instead of the usual 5 or 6 or 7 kilometers, I arrived home again, and when I went to the toilet, I was suddenly peeing something that looked like Coca-Cola. I was thinking, shit, is it, what's happening? Is it something like diverticulosis or something like that? That there's something sticking out of my bowels and reaching to the urinary tract, because it basically had the color of my shit. So that was extremely scary. I started to look up on the internet what was happening, and okay, so I tend to be not fear-mongering for myself, so after reading a bit, I understood that it was rhabdomyolysis. So what happened was that basically because of this running and all the pounding on the ground there of your feet, and the pounding in your knees, maybe elsewhere as well, that at least that's what they say, that can cause the very rapid destruction of your muscles. So if you are untrained, for example, especially, then that can be that can be the case. Me personally, I was quite well trained, so for me it was nothing special to go a few kilometers further than usual. So that puzzled me a little bit. And well, I went to the doctor to explain it, and well, the only thing we could do was keep an eye on it and see what happens in the weeks after. And well, as with a lot of things, then in the weeks after, of course, everything is okay again. And so this symptom would reappear like 1 or 2 months later, once again. It might appear in a worse or less worse degree, but usually it was quite moderate, and it was the symptoms would also disappear within 1 day, let's say. So I was lucky over there, because rhabdomyolysis can be quite dangerous. It releases toxins in the body, and those are especially detrimental for the kidneys. And well, if you get acute kidney disease, then you don't live very long anymore. And well, I'm already, as a diabetic, taking so much effort to protect my kidneys in the first place. But the same thing happened over there. After I went carnivore, this symptom never returned, and now I'm also doing long runs. I can easily jog for 10 kilometers. Well, I cannot be totally sure that oxalates were the reason for my rhabdomyolysis. It could also have been the carnivore diet itself. One aspect of the carnivore diet is the fact that you are in ketosis, and ketosis also has a protective effect. It reduces inflammation, and also after an exercise it can speed up the recovery of the muscles. And finally, well, blood glucose control could have played a role in theory, because they say that diabetics have a slight bigger tendency to develop rhabdomyolysis. But in my case, again, I think that it doesn't apply, because my blood glucose management was quite okay, especially in the times that I am exercising. So in summer in particular, my blood glucose levels, even on this Mediterranean diet, were already quite okay. They would go out of range sometimes, but certainly not to 300 milligrams per deciliter, for example. Well, as a final note, so I talked about oxalates, but I am not suggesting that you have to cut out all plants from your diet. So me personally, I'm following a carnivore diet, and a quite strict version of it. So mainly beef and no other ingredients, no spices. I do drink a little bit of coffee, but that's it. But in my opinion, the best effect, the biggest changes you will get by focusing on the big offenders. So vegetables like spinach and almonds, which I see also a lot of people in the supermarket buying very often. So not only the gluten-free people or the health-minded people, but you see almonds everywhere nowadays. And spinach is a typical vegetable that everybody eats when they want to be healthy. So try to avoid those ingredients, and it could very well be that you see rapid benefits from that. Well, there you have it. That was my experience with runner's bladder and rhabdomyolysis. A experience luckily from the past. I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments if you have had similar experiences. Did you find relief of similar symptoms with the carnivore diet? Do you get relief on a different diet? That would be interesting as well, maybe even a vegan diet. I would love to hear that. Stay tuned for more videos, and see you next time.